In a series where each game has over 108 characters and has been around for so long, it's already hard to keep track of everyone in the games, let alone those who only appeared in supplemental materials like the manga and novels. So in this video, I want to highlight some characters who showed up only once and were never mentioned again. And just to be clear, we're not talking about people like Sidonia or Kirill, who literally disappeared at the end of their respective games, or people who just went on a journey and were never heard from again, but characters that played a part in the background lore and yet seem to be forgotten by Konami. This video might contain some spoilers for the upcoming Star Leap. While I'm pretty sure the character related to that is no longer considered canon and unlikely to appear, his story overlaps with Achilles. So if you're trying to stay completely spoiler-free for Star Leap, you might want to skip the first chapter. Michel is a character who appeared in the Konami parody comic series Suikoden manga, which, despite its name, is not actually a parody work. Although it contains a couple of gag strips, it also tells serious stories that provide backstory for characters in the original Suikoden. It's somewhat unique as a publication, as it's the only manga that was published before the release of Suikoden 2, making it the only manga solely focused on the original game. It also contains the original backstory for Odessa, where she is about to marry Achilles until his arrest for harboring a fugitive, a story that will soon be explored in the upcoming Star Leap. While Achilles has since been made explicit canon, while he is not mentioned in the original game at all, he is prominently featured in supplementary materials and had his own entry in the original Suikoden Encyclopedia. Because the Kiwami Encyclopedia only features characters that are directly mentioned in the games, he doesn't have an entry there, though he is mentioned in Odessa's entry. Michel, however, has never appeared outside the manga. In the manga, he is introduced as an orphan adopted by Achilles, and despite Odessa not having actually married Achilles yet, he still calls her mom. Achilles was a member of the pre-Liberation Army resistance movement, and one night a fugitive entered his mansion seeking shelter. Achilles hid him just as Kraze barged into the house with a group of soldiers searching for the man. Just as Achilles was about to get Kraze to leave, Kraze recognized Michel. He tricked him into revealing that the fugitive really was in the house by telling him that if he simply told the man who was hiding, "It's okay now," everything would be fine, and Michel believed him. Kraze finds the fugitive and arrests Achilles for treason. As Odessa plans to set Achilles free, she leaves Michel in the care of Marie at her inn. Michel has never been seen or heard from since then, and has rarely, if ever, been mentioned outside the manga. He doesn't have an entry in the original encyclopedia, nor in the Marugoto or the Kiwami Encyclopedia. It's safe to say that if Michel doesn't appear, or is at least mentioned in Star Leap, he has probably been retconned and no longer exists in the continuity, likely because having a child be responsible for his father's death, even accidentally, is quite harsh. Told you it wasn't a funny story. Ted's wife is another character from the parody comic, and shows that Suikoden 4 was not the first Suikoden media to decide you don't actually have to name every character, even if they matter to the story, as she's never given a name beyond that girl. At some point during Ted's 300 years of wandering, he was injured while being pursued by Windy and collapsed in a forest outside the village of Mu. A girl from the village found him, took him to her home, and nursed him back to health. The two fell in love and eventually married, and Ted spent 10 years with her. However, his wife eventually noticed he hadn't aged a day since they met, and despite her desire to stay with him forever, he leaves her and the village behind. However, soon after he leaves, he hears a rumor that the village of Mu has been wiped out, and every person in the village had their right hand cut off at the wrist. Ted decides to go back to the village and discovers that the rumors were true. There is not a single person left alive, and the house he shared with his wife is completely destroyed, finding only his wife's wedding ring in the rubble. As Ted breaks down crying, the Soul Eater activates, suggesting it's taking his wife's soul. So yeah, I have no idea why they call this a parody. Like the governor of El Eel and Graham Cray's son, Ted's wife has never been given a name and has never been mentioned outside this manga, as far as I can find. She doesn't have an entry in either encyclopedia, and Ted's entries don't mention her either. Technically, nothing explicitly states that this story is no longer canon, as Ted would be unlikely to talk about these events. However, some manga panels show a rifle hanging on the wall in their house, which is very unlikely. In the Suikoden world, only the Howling Voice Guild knows how to make guns and gunpowder and will kill anyone who tries to steal their secret. If someone were to successfully steal one, the guild would hunt them down and kill them, no matter the cost. This error probably stems from the manga predating much of the later established lore, and is thus likely not canon. Alternatively, you could say the gun was a replica, made by someone who once saw one, and that it was not actually functional, or simply that the artist made a mistake. Clant is a character who appears in the first chapter of Suikoden Volume 2, titled Pride. He leads a group of bandits calling themselves the Firebringers, raiding the village of Millet in the grasslands while posing as the legendary Flame Champion. Through the efforts of Nash, Camus, and Miklatov, he is eventually defeated and unmasked. The actual unmasking happens off-screen, likely so the artist would not need to draw a face for him. But he is identified by the former Matilda Knights as Clant, the former vice commander of the White Knights under Gordeau, who fled Matilda when the Alliance army attacked Rockaxe. That is also the name and information listed for him in the original encyclopedia. So what's the problem? Well, somewhere along the way, he seems to have lost both his name and his background. In Marugoto Suikoden, he's listed only as leader, with no name and no history, just saying, the leader of a group of bandits who impersonated the Flame Champion and plundered villages across the grasslands. He was defeated by Nash and his companions. The same goes for the Kiwami Encyclopedia, which is the most recent reference I can find. There, he is described only as the leader of the Firebringers, noting merely that he falsely claimed to be the Flame Champion, with no mention of his name or his past as a White Knight, and no other entries mention him by name either. And it is not a case of him having two separate entries, one for his real name and one for his masked identity. Neither the Marugoto nor the Kiwami includes an entry for a character named Clant at all. Either Konami simply forgot about him or he was quietly retconned. In either case, Clant is a special example because all of this information came directly from one of the games, the primary canon, and yet now he seems to have disappeared.